Hello, my name is Joseph Yun. Welcome to the Telecom World Asia 2021. I'm the chairman of Hong Kong Federation of E-commerce. Today, I'm going to talk about the cross-border e-commerce development in China for the new normal. So let's get started. Throughout the pandemic, e-commerce adoption has been rising dramatically. The global average is around 77% of the people over the internet will make purchase over the e-shop. And for countries and locations where the infection rate is high, you will see that the e-commerce adoption will go even higher. And we see that the trend of e-commerce adoption throughout the world will continue to be increasing as the COVID-19 recovery. Now, you will see in these slides, China has been increasingly be the largest e-commerce market in the world. But not to forget, the ASEAN country, although from the magnitude-wise is not as big as some other region in the world, but it has a very big growth rate for the past 5 years. There's almost like 5.7% in the ASEAN market. And when we talk about the biggest market in China, right, and it is now around 1.5 trillion US dollar in terms of the market size. Let's talk about the ecosystem of cross-border e-commerce in China. As you can see, if we started off from the where the product all came from, with the supply side, the manufacturers coming from a lot of overseas products. There are foreign brands coming from the Western world, there are foreign brands from Japanese, and from all around. Then when it goes into the platforms, we all know that mainland Chinese people, they are so much familiar with their own marketplaces and the platform that the user experience they used to get in mainland China. So if you are planning to have your product entering into the China market, you really have to look into this marketplace, as well as there are some social commerce that you will have to consider. Now, there are also some what we call the rebate sites, like a group buy platform where they offer incentives when you start buying overseas. Entering into China market, you also have to consider how you have the fulfillment being done, namely the international part of the logistic, domestic part delivery, as well as in some of the products, they may choose to have a direct postal way to getting things into China. We'll get to each part of them, the pros and cons, and which one would you pay. Then payment. There are many different ways of payments. Not that many Chinese people have Visa and Master be able to settle the payment through PayPal, whereas many of them are using the Chinese way of payment settlement through WeChat and Alipay. Now, the integration with these payment gateway will also be crucial when you start considering selling into China. And then lastly, warehousing. It is important that the product that you sell in China that has got local storage, or otherwise, Chinese people, they will be not very patient if your product will only get shipped in, say, like 3 days later. So it's important that you have a very good warehouse and logistics strategies. So if you can see in this ecosystem, right, there are involvement of some foreign brands, foreign companies, foreign logistic couriers, but then there's also many local flavors, local service provider, marketplaces, payment gateway, and so on. So there isn't a true model whether you work with pure local players or any international player. There's really need to be a hybrid way of working things. Now, another way to look at the China market is both the import and export ratio. In this diagram, it shows that the import and export through from 2017 all the way closer to 2019, the export ratio and import ratio is getting close to 50-50. So whether you are trying to get product out from China selling overseas, or you are trying to sell product into China, the kind of demand and the cross-border e-commerce sales, that's roughly 50-50 at this moment. All right, so let's define what do we mean by cross-border e-commerce in China. Now, there's a wider way of looking at it, or there's a narrow way of looking at the definition of cross-border e-commerce. So let me start with the narrow way of how we look at cross-border into China. Now, obviously, there are some marketplaces that is globally well-known, namely like Amazon in the US, the Gmarket in Korea, and so on. Now, a lot of people feel like mainland people, when they try to buy things from overseas, these are the places that where they will go. Is it really? Now, the situation is those obviously are one of the ways, but there are a wider definition of what do we mean by cross-border e-commerce. There are local marketplaces, big marketplaces in mainland China, like I'm sure you're all familiar with Alibaba, Tmall, JD, and so on. And then there are also some overseas marketplaces where the owner of the company, they source the product from overseas and then sell directly into mainland China. And not to forget, there are also people, traveling all around the world, in particular for the time before COVID, right? They can get things off from duty free. They can also shop around in overseas merchants. And they can even go to those overseas merchants to buy them online. So all these count into what we call cross-border e-commerce as a definition. Now, the kind of population that we talk about in mainland China is continuous growing for cross-border e-commerce. And if we talk about all the way up to the COVID time, 2020, there's almost 138 million people in mainland China that will buy things off from overseas. So that gives you a magnitude of the kind of people that will involve in these activities. Now, there are different models of handling cross-border e-commerce. Just now we have been defining, what do we mean by cross-border e-commerce. Now, if we zoom into the cross-border e-commerce for import only, so selling into China, the market size is around $26 billion US, and it's continued growing. In this segment, there are different ways of getting things into China. Now, there's pros and cons. There's no perfect way. For example, marketplaces like Alibaba, Tmall, JD, Worldwide, these kind of big marketplaces, we call them B2C imports because they are actually buying things from overseas, ship them into China, and then sell it domestically in China. Now, the product range would kind of limit because it really depends on where they source the product. Like if you got some really authentic Southeast Asians or Japanese or European products, you may not find as many as when you fly all the way to Europe, right? But so the product range may be limited. There could be problem with whether the product is a genuine product. So there may be some merchant that they are not being right, and they may be having some fake and poor quality products. But the good things about it is logistically is very efficient. Why? Because all these product has already been purchased by the large marketplaces, and all the delivery is locally made. So when you place an order for something in Europe, because the product already pre-delivered into mainland China, they will get it over to you within a day. And of course, because that all controlled by the local operator, so you will have fluent Chinese, 24 hours, 7 by 24 hours, support. And if you have any problem with it, you can easily return and refund. So this is a good thing about buying off from the local big marketplaces. Now there are some C2C way of people like group buy. People like there's some people that they go to Europe, they go to Japan, they buy things and then they bring it back home. Now again, the variety wouldn't be big because a particular person C2C, right? They cannot bring the whole lot of department stores. And now because it's very much a personal dependency, So the genuine level of the product is a question. Logistic wise, is not as efficient because you have to wait on that buyer to bring things out from the overseas. They may even choose to use a postal way to ship it into China. Then lastly, customer service. Well, imagine that person purchased a product in Europe and then they brought it back to China. Can you really return the product? That's a big question there. So customer service is a big question. Now lastly, what if a mainland Chinese people they going through the internet and then shop directly into your shop? Now or they can shop directly into some overseas marketplaces. Obviously, product range wise is the best because the consumer come directly to you into your country, and they don't have to worry about the product is genuine or fake. So because they go directly to the source, right? They buy it off from Netherlands, they buy it off from the United States, directly from the brand owner. So there wouldn't be an issue of buying off a fake product. But then the problem, how long does it take? It takes ages. It can go up to 2 weeks or even a month. Can today's Chinese consumer be able to wait for that long? And lastly, customer service. When consumer come all the way to United States or to Japan to buy things off from a shop over there, how can they get the language support? How can they get the same time zone support? And with not talk about the return and refund. I think what I have just shared with you is the landscape of why people will choose what platform. Obviously, every single consumer will have their own decision, but then in this page, you can clearly see that the decision will go for the number one option, which most favorable to a lot of Chinese people. So the landscape. Now, COVID has been speeding up a lot of international brands going into China through e-commerce. And let me take one example, L'Oreal in 2020. So with L'Oreal is a giant cosmetic and beauty brand. 35% of the sales actually been done in Asia, and this is the wrong number, and then 65% has been done rest of the world. But if we look at the sales complete online, global percentage only 26% complete online sales, but China over 60% of the business of L'Oreal is being complete in e-commerce. Now that is a very significant piece of shares when you consider your brand going into China. And COVID also bring up the consumption of foreign purchase and foreign brands entering into Tmall International. You see in the timeline there, from the time COVID start 2020 March until the end of 2020, there are a number of large foreign brands going into having their store first time in Tmall. And just during the time of January to March, the 3 months within 2020, there's 327% of a growth for overseas shops open their brands in Tmall. And up to the March 2020, over 78 countries with over 22,000 stores has already been opened in Tmall from overseas. Now, so how do we see the impact of COVID bring to the e-commerce, cross-border e-commerce in China? And how do we look forward for the recovery of the COVID? Now, we see that overseas travel will still have to be suspended for quite some time. So online purchase, the consumer in China, when they consider buying things from overseas, will still heavily depending online. Now, in the beginning of COVID, a lot of purchase focus on necessities. So luxury item, things that are not in a necessity categories are less purchased. And in the results, there's an overloading of delivery, and the arrival is kind of be delayed on all these big marketplaces. Now let's look at the other channels. Direct channels, C2C channel. During the COVID time, it's almost seriously impact or totally shut down. Why? Because people cannot even travel. So how can you expect the people to get things in, to get the peoples in? So that immediately separate the larger marketplace and some other means of cross-border e-commerce. Looking into the recovery of COVID, we see the increased demand from necessity items into health and personal cares. And also we see that most of the overseas brands have a record high of selling post-pandemic. And we look at other channels, other cross-border e-commerce channel. Online channel is now not just a gesture, but is becoming a major sales channel as compared to the traditional brick and mortar. Now, as part of a cross-border online sales, because of traveler is no longer be in many parts of the world, so a lot of consumption, a lot of spending power is very much rely on online sales. And however, because the travel suspension in many parts of the world, some channels that choose to use people as a delivery medium to get things into China is still being impacted. Now, if we look at the nearest figures on 2021, just the first quarter against the second quarter, the growth of import cross-border e-commerce is around 35% growth. So it's very significant. Now, let's look at 4 big trends of cross-border e-commerce in China. The number one trend that we see is that brand driven the consumption of cross-border e-commerce. So people look for brands, and in particular, mainland Chinese people, they cannot travel overseas. So the familiar with the overseas brands helps them to make the decision when they make an order. And the second big trend that we see is product diversify. We see a couple of categories is growing demand on the 2020 onward. For example, there's 187% growth on men category, personal care and beauty. There's 137% growth on children's, baby, mother cares and toy. And lastly, there's almost 200% growth on OTC medical medicines and supplements for people concerning health. The third trend is the uprising of the lower income market in mainland China. Yeah, a lot of people is focusing on like top tier 1 cities in China, but then we see that there's over 44% of growth in GMV in those level 3 cities as compared to 2016. So maybe this is one of the area that you have to look into are the tier 2 and tier 3 cities in mainland China. Then lastly, content. As you see that content marketing and the social commerce, live commerce in mainland China is increasing dramatically. People simply too lazy and too busy in browsing their mobile phone anymore. They want somebody, have a lot of followers, share with them what is good for them, what is recommended for them. So social commerce is becoming something really big. And another trend is that this social commerce platform has a very strong tie with the bonded warehouse. So every single KOL, when they go live, they almost have to make sure that every single piece of this item is already be stored in the bonded warehouse locally. Then these KOLs will be able to do the selling instantly. So this is another trend that we see happening during and post-COVID. Now, consumer behavior in cross-border e-commerce in China, there's over 80% of the people who shop for overseas product will do more than once a month. Now, this is significant. So, which means every single month they do buy things. So, over 80% of the people. And if you look at this, there's over 10% of people that they buy 3 times a week. That's very, very crazy of consumer in mainland China. They hunger for a lot of overseas product. And I guess in the previous slides we did talk about some categories that are in the top demand, namely the beauty categories, mother care, food, and health products. And looking forward, the big wishes of the top purchase product, beauty is still number one, but then we have the food coming up and healthcare, then lastly mother and baby. So if you are in these product categories, you probably will be considering China as one of your major market. The online shop purchase power has continued to be growing post-pandemic. If you take a look at the basket size, right? There's altogether, the 64% of the shoppers will spend over $80 per purchase, $80 US per purchase, and that's a lot. If you notice, Amazon is doing free delivery of over around $45 US. Now, as a matter of fact, mainland Chinese people in 64% of the people willing to pay over $80 US per purchase. So that explains to you why Amazon is giving out $45 purchase with free delivery, because that is the average or the way below the actual spending, and people spend way over $45. Okay, so having said that, the cross-border e-commerce opportunities in China, the landscape, consumer behavior, and all those details. Now, you probably get ready to come, right? So where to start? So when you consider coming into China, China is a giant, is a big, countries. Where do you start? Now, my first option for you would be the Greater Bay Area. Now, this has been a widely discussed and promoted scheme for the Chinese government. The Greater Bay Area is consists of Hong Kong, Macau, and 9 cities within the Guangdong areas. Namely like the big cities like Guangzhou, Shenzhen, Zhuhai, and so on. Now, it covers 71 million people, which equate to around just 1% of the total Chinese population. Then you may ask, why bother? There's only 1% of the population. And geographically, it's only covered 5% of the land in China. So it's small places. And but however, if you take a look at the why am I saying that if you're entering into China, let's take a look at the Greater Bay Area, because it contributes 12% of the GDP of the entire country. How much that is? So in 2018, that's $1.6 trillion US, and we're expecting 3 times of a growth. By 2030, the GDP of Greater Bay Area would get up to 4.6 trillion US dollar. And if you look for a place to start entering into China, Greater Bay Area would definitely be the area that you would be looking into. The contribution of the export is also like 25%. And one more thing important to share with you is that over 50% of the technology patents coming in from this area. So if you are considering a technology partnership throughout the localization, this is definitely a place where you can consider. And within the Greater Bay Area, you also see a lot of differences that make up the interesting point of the growing engine. You have a global financial center in Hong Kong, and then you have a travel hub in Guangzhou if you want to go anywhere in China. You have a technology, and you have a warehousing hub in Dongguan as well as Shenzhen, and then you have a casino and entertainment and all the amusement in Macau. So with so small of a place, you see that you have a lot of top of the world assets and the properties that you can get out from this area. Now, in view of that, myself, together with each of the e-commerce association around the Greater Bay Area, we have stand up and signed a contract and to align each other. I mean, I'm from Hong Kong. I wouldn't be able to be giving you the best advice for Shenzhen or for Guangzhou. But what if the chairman of Guangzhou E-commerce Association? What if the chairman of the Shenzhen E-commerce Association? We now align together, as you can see on the photos, that when you are getting in touch with us, or any one of us, we will bring you to the right places where you want to get within the Greater Bay Area. Now, what we are establishing is what we call a Greater Bay Area Cross-Border E-Commerce Resource Center. This resource center is been come together with all the e-commerce association within the Greater Bay Area, and we have around 15,000 companies in this area that belongs to us as the members. So what we can do is we can do a alignment between the e-commerce service provider as well as the online shops merchants. It's a B2B alliance. On the service provider side, whether you are trying to provide service to these mainland merchants, you know, from Southeast Asia, from Europe, from any part of the world, come to us. We will bring you your service, introduce yourself to the right merchants in China. Vice versa, if you are a shop owner, you are a retailer, you want to sell into China, you definitely need to look for partners that are providing platform, IT services, advertising, media, marketing, as well as logistics and payment. Now, where to look for? You come to the resource center, we'll give you all the good recommendations that can help you to start your business into China. So the service that we will provide is business matching, e-commerce training, we have regular events and workshops, and lastly, we give you consultation with all the right person locally and professionally. Our visions, you know, given the tremendous potential in the Greater Bay Area, and the whole world is looking into selling through into China, and not to mention that so many Chinese consumer hunger to buy things from overseas. We look forward to bring Greater Bay Area and ourselves as a gateway for global e-commerce. As you can see on this page, the world has never been, you know, in one places where there are overseas platforms, giant platform, payment companies, and also there are Chinese giants, Chinese platform, and there are a whole bunch of mainland Chinese shoppers want to shop overseas. And obviously, there's also a lot of people from the rest of the world want to buy things into China. Now, you can definitely see a point of exchange here. That there is a need for somebody to stand up to help to collaborate between the two sides of the market. So we hopefully Greater Bay Area and ourselves be able to be a gateway for you. Now, I'm running out of time, and I know that you probably want to hear more and to listen to more of the development of the Greater Bay Area. Now, if you are interested, you can scan this QR code or click into this YouTube link, right? And there's a TV show that I have been interviewed by a TV station in Hong Kong, talk about the development, the latest development of e-commerce in the Greater Bay Area, and what are the opportunities and challenges. And I have to apologize, this is a Chinese talk show, so it will be speaking in Cantonese. And I hope for those of you who can understand Cantonese, if you're interested, you can go into this QR code and YouTube link, and you can further find out more of what the opportunities there is. All right, so this is my presentation for today. I hope you enjoy the stories that I'm sharing. If you have any questions, please do leave your questions to the organizer, and they will pass the question off to me, and I'll try to answer your question one by one. Thank you very much. Again, my name is Joseph Yun, and I'm the chairman of Hong Kong Federation of E-Commerce. Thank you very much. Have a nice day.